I'm going to call up our next panelists. Antuanette Gomez from Pleasure Peaks, Dr. Jordan Tishler from InhaleMD, Virginia Vidal. From Mary's Wellness, Melissa Rolston moderating from Women Grow. We've got the 4 to 4:30 panel called Let's Talk Sex, Fucking with Cannabis.
Hello, everyone. So originally when I agreed to do this, I thought that it was about intimacy and it's about fucking with cannabis. So I figured I would start it off by asking a relatively blunt question. So, my lovely panelist, what was your first encounter combining cannabis and fucking? And was there any sort of epiphany, either emotionally or physically?
Well, my first introduction to cannabis and fucking actually turned out to be a really nice breed, which was called Ave Maria. I was warned about this breed that it would encourage sexual appetite. And oh boy, did it really encourage sexual appetite. Not only encourage sexual appetite, we got a little how can I say, looking for words here, a little frisky and decided to get away from the children, took off to the beach, and we consumed the cannabis and moonlight, and everything was perfect. To the point that, yes, we did get intimate and did have cannabis and fuck. And the outcome from that was actually a couple weeks later, I found out I was expecting triplets. So if anyone attempts to tell you that cannabis can interfere with infertility or fertility, I could tell you from my own experience, they're incorrect.
So, Antuanette, would you like to, you don't have to answer from a personal experience. But...
I'm Antuanette Gomez. I am the founder and CEO of Pleasure Peaks, a cannabis lubricant line. One of my first encounters with testing, of course, when it came to my cannabis lubricant line was the research and development, which was super fun. And what I found was that while using the lubricant, especially when it came to the oil-based with the CBD and a THC blend, I found that multiple orgasms were a lot easier to reach for females specifically. And once I found that that was something that was linked directly to the lubricant, that was something that I wanted to delve more deep into. So after that multiple orgasm, I decided to do more research with other women and found that this is definitely a direct correlation. So that obviously delved deep into my 2 lubricant lines that I have now.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jordan Tishler. I think I'm just going to plead the fifth on this one. You guys have a fifth, right?
Would you like to make a comment from any sort of patient case study that you've encountered?
Oh, goodness. You know, I take care of a lot of patients for whom sexuality is a major issue. This includes people for whom that's the sort of primary issue is around sexuality. And then obviously I have a lot of other patients who are older or sicker and have these as sort of outgrowths of those things going on in their life. And, you know, patients come to me and say, Doc, I know you're treating me for my pain, but oh my God, the sex is great. Yeah. Okay. You know, I saw a middle 40-year-old woman with MS this week, wheelchair bound, and she said, you know, all the other medicines make me unable to come, and the cannabis is great, it fixes it. And I'm like, she's sitting in the room with me and her wife, and I'm just like, you go, you know? So yeah, it's really important and powerful.
So I guess this next question is directed at Virginia. So when you first encountered cannabis and fucking, and clearly you had a wonderful experience, did that ever inspire you to never have sober sex again?
Actually, no. It just became a lot more fun. I find that cannabis can connect you in a different level that you cannot connect as if you did it and when you're sober. The intimacy is quite different. Can be in an emotional level as well as in a sexual level, depending on the partner that you're with. But it definitely does enhance the connection.
I'd just like to add to that, you know, you were talking about sex as a couple, but don't underestimate the importance of cannabis in your solo efforts as well.
That's right. I've had that experience too, actually, myself with some cannabis oils that were actually made for females, and it was a very pleasant experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would love to touch on that with the personal use of cannabis, using it within your sex life by yourself. Masturbation can be very, very healing, and you can only imagine when using a cannabis topical with your genitals how it can be definitely transferring into a sexual type of healing. What's beautiful for women right now, which is super exciting, is that this cannabis lubricant, when using it by yourself, can bring a lot of awareness in that area, and when reflecting, it can be very healing for a lot of women. And I feel like more women need to explore in that area for themselves, and I'm really excited the way it's going.
I think that's great. Because I'm the guy up here, I'm supposed to maybe be the counterpoint, so to speak. I'll just say that, right now there's a lot of discussion about whether women do masturbate, and should masturbate, and what they get out of it and what not. And I think that the answer is yes. But let us not forget that men don't necessarily just have to jerk it off and be done, right? I mean, that there's as unmasculine as this may be, there's exploration and understanding that can come to us through our own exploration of sex by ourselves. And cannabis is a great way to sort of elevate your mind and get past some of the social stigma of the thought and emotional content that goes along potentially with masturbation.
I've encouraged and have had some of my male friends try some of these cannabis products, and it was quite interesting. I've encouraged males to try the various products that are out there that are cannabis-based, and there's a lot of great products out there, and there's some of them that are a little different, but I encourage anyone that is interested to try some of the lubricants that are existing on the market.
And I think it's beautiful that these, like we do cannabis couples retreats, and I love cannabis for males because it really lets go of their ego in a sense to really delve deep into their sexuality in a very honest space. But I love cannabis for being that tool to use because it almost melts away immediately. It's very, very helpful.
Amazing.
Yeah, very helpful also, with anxiety and stress, but also PTSD, all of which can impact people's relationships in a negative way. We got to get past that. We talked a bit about topicals today, and I think that I just wanted to touch on, kind of going back to your story, the way in which topicals can really have a wonderful effect, but they're a local effect, meaning they're down there, And when we start to look at the psychology and biology of sexuality, really we have to remember that almost all of the action is what I say above the neck. It's in here. And for that reason, I typically recommend inhaled or other form of immediate action cannabis when you're looking for the sort of deep connection that we're talking about. So
my next question was actually going to be, when you're engaging in me time, let's call it, what is the best way to approach dosing in order to enhance an intimate connection with themselves? So you've already touched on topicals, you've already touched on the importance of also inhalation, but is there any specific strains or any other sort of method of administration that someone should look into? For example, if someone doesn't want to smoke or vaporize, what would be the best way to either microdose an edible or some sort, and how do they time out their day to make sure they get stuff done and just don't lay in bed all day?
I myself, when I'm feeling a little tired, I actually dip into my own tea, which is the nice ginseng energy tea. So it gives me that little boost, and it's a nice one with a sativa, and so that I get that energy boost again on a long, tired day. So that really does help me. That's another way I medicate and use cannabis for that purpose.
When it comes to picking which strain to use for my sexual experience, it depends what I want out of it. If I want something that is, a lot more heavy breathing, a little bit more energetic, I would definitely go for a sativa. Whereas if I wanted something that was a little bit more longer, romantic, and more intimate, I would go for definitely.
Do you have any favorites that you want to share with the
Yes,
audience here?
definitely.
I see some people taking
You
notes.
want to know the strains, of course. I absolutely love Sour diesel. Let's start with some sativas. Sour diesel is amazing for sex, 100%. When I think of indicas, I think of like a Bubba Kush. I think of like a Bubba or a Kush because both of those tend to give me a lot of a better uplifting mood. But the thing is that even though these strains work for me, it's all about journaling and finding out what strains obviously work for yourself, since everybody's endocannabinoid is just as unique as a fingerprint. So you have to really be journaling and figuring out what strains and what terpene profiles work the best for you.
You know, I haven't found that there's sort of like the sex strain anywhere. So I guess it goes along with a lot of what she's saying. I think that for a lot of my patients anyway, it really depends on what we're treating. You know, if anxiety is the issue, then, you know, we may be talking about anything, but a sativa may be very helpful to them. If we're talking about somebody who has PTSD or chronic pain, those sorts of things, then maybe an indica is more useful. But, you know, I haven't been able to sort of put my finger directly on specific strains. I will say that I think that dosing is super important. You know, it seems that the literature supports that for women, dosing is less important, meaning a little more, it's all good. But for men, less is more, right? We want to be energized and lightly buzzed, but not stoned out of our gourds, can't remember how to do the, you know, back and forth kind of thing. So this becomes an issue for men, and we have to kind of focus a little bit more on getting that right. I think that, you know, I mentioned before inhalation. I think that one of the things about inhalation, and by which, just let me say as an aside, I always mean vaporization, okay? Don't smoke. Anyway. PSA over. I think that the lovely thing about inhalation when you're talking about sexuality in a couple is that it's really quick and you can work this into the foreplay. And again, going back to my statement about sex being above the neck, it's really about that intimate connection. And using the cannabis together as part of that ritual that starts things off is a really good way to connect and to get the ball rolling. And when you start to think about other forms of use, like edibles and other oral forms, not only do they take so long to kick in, but they can kick in erratically and differently for different people. So that it may kick in for you at 20 minutes, your partner's not going to feel it for an hour, then you're out of sync. So this is part of the reason I tend to push towards that inhalation thing.
Yes, definitely. Inhalation is a lot more easier to dosage. But I want to go back to that other thing you touched on, how CBD is also great for sex. And I think we should be speaking more about it, especially for people that have sexual trauma, and how CBD is really helping them get rid of their anxieties towards sex and making them feel a lot more comfortable so they can at least be using them. Another way, just another source of method that you can be using are suppositories, which are really cool. I like using different methods because I like to shake it up. I do use edibles within my sex life as well, but if I were to use an edibles, it would definitely be like over an erotic massage that would go into something longer. I'm also a tantric sex coach, so mine are a lot more longer.
Actually, I'm looking forward to trying those suppositories. Darlene Freedom actually carries them right now, and they apparently really great, and they really help. So I'm looking forward to trying those.
And I want to just because I'm trying to raise more awareness, of course, but endometriosis is coming up more and more with women, and at alarming rates to me personally, at least. And we're getting a lot of research right now about suppositories and the link between endometriosis and suppositories, and it's really helping these women, especially with the chronic pain that they're dealing with every day. And I want to share this one case study, which is an amazing case study. And this woman had endometriosis, and she was in so much pain in her cervix area, basically, where she wasn't even able to have sex at this point because it is so painful. So you can only imagine being very young, in your early 20s, having an amazing relationship and not being able to actually share that with your partner. So after using these suppositories, she's been able to get rid of her pain. She's able to walk a lot better. And now she's at the point where she actually got pregnant, which is absolutely insane. And she didn't think that she could ever get pregnant. So there is more research coming up on these things. And please share the news if you do hear of someone that is suffering from endometriosis.
I would just add that, excuse me, that if you're really curious, you can make suppositories at home, and there's a recipe on my website.
Oh, wow.
There's even CaptainDave.com where he can send you suppository molds right to your house. There's tons of people out there.
Amazing. So we've been speaking a lot about the female voice from this panel and the female experience. So I just wanted to bring it back to Dr. Tishler and ask, what's the benefit of using cannabis as a sexual stimulant as opposed to Viagra or other sort of supplementations on the market? And do you have any examples of an emotional versus a physical experience for any of those?
It's a good question. I think that the first place we have to start with this question is, what is Viagra good for, right? Viagra is good for one thing and one thing only, which is erectile dysfunction in men, right? Have trouble getting an erection, Viagra will help you. But that's all it does. So it doesn't really do any of the things that we might want it to do beside that, like increase libido or prolong time to ejaculation, or make it easier to ejaculate, depending on which side of that spectrum you are on, or to have greater orgasm intensity or greater sort of orgasm fulfillment. Those are that really kind of describes the whole panoply of sex from beginning to end. And Viagra will work with just the erection side of things. It doesn't do anything for the other things that we just talked about, and it doesn't do anything for women either. Cannabis, on the other hand, really gets in at the heart of all of those phases and really can help us address all of the issues that follow along that path. So from the male perspective, if we're not talking about erectile dysfunction, which, by the way, is roughly about 20% of men, typically in the older ranges, 70-year-olds and plus, whereas issues about low libido or premature ejaculation affect roughly another 20 or 30% respectively, and those are across all age groups. So, there are issues that men face that are way beyond just erectile dysfunction. So cannabis functions to support all of those things in a very effective way.
Thank you very much. I wanted to we kind of brought up the issues about the moon cycle or a woman's menstruation cycle, and I can attest from my personal experience that I've dealt with a lot of pain, especially within the first 8 hours of entering my moon cycle. And I found that by actually incorporating cannabis products as well as some me time, I guess you could say, it's actually allowed me to reduce that time frame of pain. So I'm just wondering, is there any sort of studies on that can prove that having an orgasm can reduce the menstrual cycle pain or anything like that?
I think that there's actually some pretty strong anecdotal evidence for that sort of thing, but I am not aware of any more rigorous scientific studies on the subject. On the other hand, my knowledge is in that intersection between sexuality and cannabis, so there may very well be stuff that I'm not aware of. There's not a lot of data to suggest that cannabis is good for menstrual pain, except that we all know that it is, right? I mean, it's good for chronic pain. We've done those studies, and there's no reason to exempt no reason to exempt menstrual cramps from the category of pain. I have patients for whom this is the problem of their life, and where cannabis is extraordinarily helpful and gets them back on their feet again.
Thank you very much.
Actually, we get emails over and over about Mary's Wellness and our products of teas and how it helps women with their menstrual cycles and with cramps, and as well as menopause. We have had many people write to us and let us know that our product, the teas, have really helped and deal with menstrual cramps and menopausal symptoms as well as sleeping. It has helped a lot of people with sleep.
I can definitely say that your teas have helped me in that situation. Thank you very much.
I like using cannabis topical literally right at my lower abdomen, directly on it, because I have the worst menstrual cramps every single month. Like, I have to stop absolutely everything I'm doing, and I have to find that cream, and it's the only thing that helps me. If I put the cream on, it works within 15 seconds, literally, rather than even inhaling, which would be faster, but I feel like topicals have a great way of using a localized area. So I can still be working and I won't have to be psychoactively high.
Amazing. So I was just wondering, you were speaking about your personal experiences a lot, Antuanette. Do you have any sorts of case studies of any of the couples that you've worked with that you've noticed that cannabis has actually enhanced their life through your tantric workshops?
Most definitely, especially the tantric ceremonies that we have during our retreats. Like I said before, with cannabis, it really allows us to really delve deeper into our relationships, to really be honest on what we want out of our relationships, and to really have our sexual needs and desires met. And these are something that kind of gets swept under the rug in relationships. Yes, we're working and we're going to school and we're running businesses and we love each other and we sleep in the bed all day. Yet some of our dreams, our needs kind of, get fallen. So what we do is we basically make sure that you have your sexual life is more than everything you've ever wanted, and that will definitely bleed in all assets in your life.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to kind of go back to dosing and with partners. Some of you had mentioned that you would either incorporate an edible if there's going to be some sort of erotic massage, if there's going to be a lot of foreplay. Like, do either of you or have any of your patients develop some sort of regimen that they've shared with either of you or your guys' own personal experiences that maybe the audience would like to take away to incorporate into their own sex lives?
Well, there's always that, I don't know about you guys, but the smoke afterwards, well, it tends to be the joint afterwards. So that's kind of the procedure for relaxing time. Oh, I'm so tired, or let's chill now. And then you get to smoke, and then again, that can get the conversation going again, and before you know it, it's a whole cycle, and you're at it again. So smoking can also bring a relaxation. Doesn't always turn into a cycle, but yeah, having that joint after you've performed or had sex, it's tend to be kind of a routine.
Amazing.
I like using cannabis in the bedroom because it keeps my bedroom very creative. It's always different, and you can always use it in many different ways. So it's really about how you know exactly what you want the outcome to be when using cannabis. Because I get tons of people being like, everybody tells me that cannabis helps with my sexual life, yet I keep smoking a joint and I get too high and I'm just so embarrassed in front of my boyfriend. And I was like, that is completely normal, that is completely fine, but you're not smoking the right strain. So remember to write down this strain, remember to keep it in a journal, know that it doesn't work for you. Maybe you got really tired, maybe that is just not the strain that you should be smoking early on in the day. Maybe it would be something at a different time that would work best for you. But knowing what you want and choosing the medicine around that is giving the power to the person.
And every strain affects everyone differently. I mean, some strains will affect someone in a more sexual way, when it will affect other people in a more energy way, where they just are creative, and it just affects people differently. So experiment with the different strains and know how you react to them.
And you may find that less is more. It sounds
That's
like
right.
if this particular patient or woman was saying, look, I get so high, I get giddy, and then I feel like I'm being a fool and whatever, then maybe part of the recipe is, instead of smoking the joint, smoke half the joint, share the joint, To your question, you were asking, I think, for some tips, and one of the ones that I actually like to recommend is the good old shotgun. You guys know this one?
Kind of familiar with it.
All right, so, basically you inhale and then you pass your breath to your partner so that they can inhale, right? And it's very close and intimate and leads to more than inhalation.
I would demonstrate, but I don't think I'm your type.
That's a great tip. I can definitely attest that it's a wonderful tip. So I was wondering if we could maybe open up the floor to any questions that anyone has for the panelists this evening.
Yeah, we got a few minutes. There's got to be a couple hands going up.
I have a question. So I'm curious about these products, but I never know what they should be made of and what I should be looking for, because obviously it's a very specific area that you want to be careful with what you're putting in your vagina. I could just say vagina.
Most
I think,
definitely.
Right? Okay. So what should I be looking for, and what You know,
ingredients.
especially with fragrances and these types of things, I'm kind of like staying away from that, but is that something I should be using?
Yeah, for sure. Always be aware of everything you're putting in your body. You know, I always eat everything organic. All of the ingredients in my product line are organic as well. And I went to a gynecologist to make sure that all of the ingredients are okay with the pH balance of a vaginal flora. It being a very delicate area. You know what's funny is that when I started a lubricant line, I noticed that 80% of the lubricants that are available to women on a Shoppers Drug Mart shelf are actually not safe for a woman's vaginal flora, like at all, and causes us tons of yeast infections, tons of nuisances that we don't need to be dealing with. So look at the ingredients and make sure that they're absolutely clean. And then when it comes to a cannabis industry, an unregulated industry, you have to be making sure that the producers that are making these products are having tested cannabis ingredients, whether it's an oil, it's a water, or an extract. You have to be wary of those things.
Another question from a
Wait,
man
but
over here.
before we go on to the next question, let me just add this little footnote, which is that a lot of cannabis, a lot of personal lubricant products, regardless of their cannabis nature, are not good with latex condoms, and we sure don't need any STIs. So make sure that you're using a condom that's compatible with the product or vice versa.
All oils break down any latex. Pleasure Peaks has an oil and a water-based cannabis lubricant.
And coconut oil is, a common one that's used.
Nice plug. Another question.
Has there been any formal studies like Masters and Johnson yet come out, or at the university level tests
Having to do with sexuality
yeah,
or
sexuality
cannabis in particular?
and cannabis.
Oh yes, oh yes, and there's
Anything
one
you
I'm
would
very
cite?
fond of, but I don't have the time to describe it to you because it's too hilarious to do it.
You totally have time.
We totally have time.
We got 2 minutes.
Okay, are you ready?
Talk fast.
All right, I'll talk fast. So this was actually done in Britain at a university, and basically what they did was they designed a tool that would be used to measure women's sexual arousal. So this thing could measure vaginal contractility and lubrication. Not surprisingly, it looked like a dildo. Then they found a bunch of women to volunteer for this test. So they came into the laboratory whereupon said implement was inserted. And then the experiment began. So the first thing they did was they showed these women some boring stuff, like CNN. And as you can imagine, not much happened. Then they showed the women something else. They showed them some pornography. And, there was a little bit more interesting action, but, not a lot happened in this particular instance. So then they gave them cannabis. Now, in this particular case, they used actually infused, meaning IV THC, but the point still stands. So then they showed them the same things, right? So they showed them the CNN, and you know what? Not much happened again. But when they got to the pornography this time, very, very brisk reactions, proving, amongst other things, that cannabis can even make boring CNN interesting.
Amazing. Well, we're going to wrap it up quickly, no pun intended. Obviously not with an oil lubricant as we learned today. So say thank you to our panelists, and I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves. If you have any questions, they're going to stand outside. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. That was fucking awesome.